Okay, let's dive in. Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
So today we're tackling a really interesting question, one that seems almost impossible to pin down precisely. How many Pixel phones are actually sold each month in India?
Yeah, that sounds like a number buried deep inside Google, right? Or maybe some big market research firm might have it. For
Mm.
most people, though, it's just a black box.
Exactly. And that's what's so neat about the source material we're looking at today. It's not trying to magically reveal the real number.
It's more about the process.
Right. It shows how you might go about estimating something like this when you don't have all the perfect data. It reminds me of those, business case interview questions.
Oh, yeah, definitely. A
Oh.
classic guesstimate.
Oh.
Or a Fermi problem, basically.
Yeah,
Using logic and reasonable assumptions to get into the right ballpark.
precisely. So our mission today is to unpack the steps this source took to estimate sales of high-end Pixel phones in India. We want to follow their logic, look at their numbers.
And see what kind of insights pop out. Not just about phones, but about how this kind of estimation even works.
Let's do it. So the source kicks off with that big question. How many Pixel phones sold monthly? But smartly, they immediately start narrowing things down.
Yes, you have to define the scope. First thing, geography. Can't do the whole world, so they specify.
India.
India, huge market, specific dynamics, makes sense to focus.
Okay, constraint one, India. What's next?
Then the product. It's not every Pixel, they clarify. High-end Pixel phones.
Okay. So the flagships, the more expensive models, that really changes who the potential buyer is.
Big time. And finally, what counts as a sale?
Right. How do they define that?
They want the total Pixel phone bought for the first time. So new units.
Gotcha. Not used ones, not resales, just new phones entering the Indian market, regardless of maybe where they were bought, like online or in a store.
Pretty much covering all the new sales channels.
Okay. So the specific problem they're tackling boils down to how many high-end Pixel phones are sold for the first time in India each month? Much clearer.
Much more manageable, yeah. And with that clear definition, the source lays out a sequence, a kind of method for building up the estimate.
How do they approach it? What's the logic?
It's a fairly standard market sizing approach, actually. Start really big, then filter down.
Oh, okay.
So begin with the total population of India.
The absolute maximum possible number.
Then you filter that. Think about who's likely to even own a phone. So consider age. Maybe exclude the very young, maybe some very old folks who don't use smartphones.
Right, trying to find the addressable market based on age, potential phone users.
Exactly. Then, from that group, segment by income.
Critical for high-end phones.
Absolutely. Because a premium phone is a major purchase. It depends a lot on income level.
It makes total sense. You need to figure out who can actually afford one.
So within those income brackets, the source then tries to estimate what portion might buy any luxury phone. Not Pixel yet, just any high-end device.
Okay, so sizing up the whole luxury phone market pool first.
Precisely. How many people are even in the market for something premium?
Got it.
Then they bring in phone lifespan. How long does a high-end phone typically last?
Okay. Why lifespan?
Because that lets you estimate annual sales. If you know roughly how many luxury phones are out there and how often they get replaced.
So if, say, phones last 3 years, maybe about a third of the owners buy a new one each year, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It captures the replacement cycle. So now you have an estimate for total annual luxury phone sales.
Okay, annual sales of all expensive phones.
Then the tricky part. What's Google Pixel's slice of that pie? What's their market share within just the luxury segment?
Right, estimate that share.
Multiplied by the total annual luxury sale.
And that gives you estimated annual Pixel sales.
You got it. And then the final sort of implicit step is just divide by 12 to get the monthly number the question asks for.
Okay, that's a clear flow. Total population, filter by age, segment by income, find luxury buyers, estimate annual luxury sales using lifespan, guess Pixel share, calculate annual Pixel sales, then divide for monthly.
That's the roadmap.
All right, let's walk through it with the actual numbers the source used. This should be interesting.
Okay, let's crunch the numbers based only on what's in the source.
Starting big. India's population.
The source uses approximately 1.3 billion.
Wow, okay, huge starting point.
Then they apply that age filter. They estimate about 60% of the population is in the likely phone-owning range, say 16 to 60 years old.
60% of 1.3 billion carry one. That's about 800 million people, is that right?
That's the number they work with, yeah. Around 800 million potential phone users. Still massive.
Definitely. Now, the income breakdown for those 800 million?
The source gives these estimates. 10% higher class, 20% upper middle class, 30% middle class, and the remaining 40% lower or lower middle class.
Wow. Okay, so doing the math, 10% of 800 million is 80 million in the higher class, and 20% is 160 million in the upper middle class.
Correct. And the source focuses on these top two tiers for buying luxury phones.
Right, assuming the others probably aren't buying the most expensive models.
Yeah, likely negligible for this specific high-end calculation.
Yeah.
So within those two groups, they make another assumption.
About who buys luxury.
Yes. They estimate that about 50%, half, of that higher class group, the 80 million, would buy luxury phones.
Okay, 50% of 80 million is 40 million.
And then for the upper middle class, the 160 million, they estimate about 20% buy luxury.
20% of 160 million, that's 32 million.
Right. So you add those together, 40 million plus 32 million.
That's 72 million potential luxury phone buyers.
Yeah, although the source actually sort of rounds this or simplifies slightly in the next step.
Right.
They state they're looking around a total of 70 million luxurious phones in India as the relevant pool for calculating replacements.
Ah, okay. So they use 70 million going forward. Still, I mean, 70 million, that's like the population of the UK or France buying high-end phones potentially. That number alone is a big takeaway about the scale.
It really highlights the potential size of that premium segment in India, absolutely.
So 70 million luxury phones in this estimated pool. How does the lifespan factor turn that into annual sales?
They assume an average phone lifespan of 3 years.
Okay, 3 years. So divide the total pool by the lifespan.
Basically, yeah.
Mhm.
In a steady market, roughly 1/3 of those phones would need replacing each year. So 70 million phones divided by 3 years.
70 divided by 3 is 23.33 million.
Right. And the source rounds this, stating it's approximately 25 million luxurious phones sold every year.
Okay, so the estimate is 25 million total high-end phones sold annually in India based on this logic.
That's their estimate for the size of the entire annual luxury market. Now, the big question.
How many of those are pixels? This feels like the hardest part to estimate without real data. How does the source tackle it?
Well, they're upfront about it. They say they don't have the exact market share figures.
So what do?
They use, and they call it this, an empirical estimation based on personal observation.
Personal observation,
Like their family, friends, acquaintances.
wow, really? They're estimating national market share based on who they know.
It seems so. It's definitely a leap, but maybe it reflects, trying to make some kind of informed guess when you've got nothing else concrete for that specific slice.
Okay, so based on their personal network, what share do they land on?
They conclude, quote, out of 100 people, only one is having Pixel phones. So based on that.
They estimate a 1% market share for Pixel within that luxury segment.
Yeah, it's the assumption they make. 1%.
That 1% carries a lot of weight then. It really shows how these estimates can mix broad data with, well, very specific, potentially non-representative personal anecdotes. Fascinating, though.
It is. So they take that 1%.
And apply it to the estimated 25 million annual luxury phone sales.
Correct. 1% of 25 million.
Okay, 1% of 25 million is 250,000.
Yep. The source puts it as 2.5-year Pixel phones sold per year in India using LOC, L for 100,000. So 2.5 LOC is 250,000?
Right. So after all those steps, the estimated annual sales figure is 250,000 high-end Pixels sold new in India per year. But the original question, it was monthly.
Ah, right. The final simple step, just divide that annual number by 12.
Okay. 250,000 divided by 12, that comes out to about 20,833.
Exactly. So according specifically to the method and the assumptions in this source document,
Right.
the final estimate is roughly 20,833 high-end Pixel phones sold for the first time in India each month.
Wow. A very specific number built from that whole chain of reasoning and estimation. It really does show how you can break down a huge, scary question.
Absolutely. And maybe the key takeaway isn't that precise number, 20,833. It's the process.
Yeah, the method.
Taking this giant unknown and building towards it using pieces you can estimate or at least make educated guesses about. Population, age, income, behavior, lifespan, market share.
And some of those intermediate numbers are really interesting too, like that potential pool of 70 million luxury phone buyers in India, just based on their model. The scale is just immense.
And you can also see how sensitive the whole thing is to the assumptions, right?
Oh, definitely. Change that 3-year lifespan to 2 years, or bump up the percentage of upper middle class buyers.
Or especially change that 1% market share figure.
Yeah, the one based on friends and family.
And the final number could swing wildly. It really highlights the challenge of getting good granular data.
It does. But it also shows the kind of structured thinking you might use when that perfect data just isn't there. You couldn't just guess 20,000 out of thin air, but you can try to estimate the building blocks.
It's a practical demonstration of analytical thinking under uncertainty. Really useful skill.
And that's why this deep dive is valuable for you, listening. It's not about saying Pixel sells 20,833 phones a month in India, because this is just one estimate based on one set of assumptions from this source.
Right. It's about understanding the approach. How somebody might tackle a question like this. Market researchers, consultants, entrepreneurs trying to size a market. This is the kind of thinking they might use.
It gives you a framework.
Exactly.
So just to recap the final number from this specific calculation, the estimate lands at roughly 20,833 high-end Pixel phones sold new each month in India.
A number built step by step, assumption by assumption.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to think about. We've seen how much this estimate depends on assumptions. Things like income distribution, luxury buying rates, that 3-year lifespan, and especially that 1% market share from personal observation.
So the question is, what other factors, maybe not even considered here, could significantly push this number up or down? And if you wanted to make this estimate more precise, what specific pieces of hard data would you absolutely need to find?
And maybe, how hard would that data actually be to get your hands on in the real world? Something to chew on.